This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning everyone. We're beginning Hilchos Pesach here in the Seif Shoneh Halachos Siman Taf Chaf Tes, and we're going to begin by discussing the inyan that the Gemara discusses and mentions in Masechta Pesachim, I believe on Daf Vav, about learning Hilchos Pesach 30 days before Pesach. Does that apply to other Yomim Tovim? Does it only apply to Pesach? And when does this begin? The opening mechaber in Hilchos Pesach says, Shoyalin v'darshin b'Hilchos Pesach kaidem Pesach shloshim yom. We ask and we expound on Hilchos Pesach before Pesach 30 days before. Umaschilin miyom ha'Purim atzmai. We begin on Purim day itself. We know the Ramah says one should learn Hilchos, one should learn before the Purim Suda. So the Poskim of Shlomo Kluger says, before the Purim Suda you should start Hilchos Pesach. But says the Reb Chaim, quoting the Mishnah Berurah, "V'adin b'shar Yom Tov nami darshan kodim l'chem lamed yom b'Hilchos." Any Yom Tov you should start 30 days before. V'das Hagra, the opinion of the Gra is the ba'atzara sagim yom aleph Sivan, that even though all other Yom Tov it takes 30 days, Shavuos doesn't have as many halachas. You only need 6 days. Okay. V'yesh oimrim. Some say 30 days is only by Pesach. There are many halachos. Kagain tchinas Chittim. You got to grind the wheat. The halachos of grinding the wheat. Vafiyas hamatzos, baking. Hagalas kelim, kashering. Ubir chametz. She'elu, these halachos ein oisin oisam kel choseim koidim ha-Pesach. If you don't do it properly before, ein lahem takan ba-Pesach. There's no way to correct it on Pesach. If you're going to start learning hilchos kashering kelim on the second day of Pesach, and you realize you actually didn't kasher your kelim properly, then you're going to have a problem with your food. So when it comes to Pesach, you got to start early. Mashen kein b'shar Yom Tov, dai be'ez Yom Kodim, other Yom Tov you can start a few days before. Ve'al kol panim b'Yom Tov gufa l'kol yama tzarich lishav v'lidrosh b'chol Yom Tov b'chosea. On Yom Tov itself, according to everyone, you need to expound on each Yom Tov in the halachas of the Yom Tov, because that's not just a din, it's actually a takana of Moshe Rabbeinu, which is the closing Gemara Masechta Megillah, Moshe Tiken Lehem LiYisrael, that they should learn the halachos of each Yom Tov on Yom Tov. She takanas Moshe V'afilu lamed lamed yomi koidem. Even if you started learning 30 days before Tzarech gam ken limoid b'chag atzmai, you're obligated to learn the halachos on the Yom Tov itself. In yoytzim v'masha karin b'inyanei shel yom. It's not enough to read the Parsha and the Chumash about Yom Tif, or to learn Inyanei Agadata on the Yom Tif. Each Yom Tif you must learn the halachas of that Yom Tif. Shetzach lomaid hahalachos masha asar u'masha mutar. What you're not allowed to do, what you're allowed to do. Now, va'achshav noyagin lidrosh b'Shabbos Haggadah. Nowadays, the minhag is to darshan on Shabbos Haggadah. What does that mean? What does that have to do with anything? Meaning, somehow we try to be yoytzei, the mitzvah of learning Hilchos Pesach before with the Shabbos Haggadah drasha. V'imchal Erev Pesach b'Shabbos, Darshim Shabbos HaKodim. If Erev Pesach comes out on Shabbos, then we're Darsh the Shabbos before. U'b'Shabbos Shuva. And Shabbos Shuva. That means Shabbos Shuva is to learn Hilchos Sukkos. Now, is that usually the subject of Shabbos Haggadah, Shabbos Shuva? No. Why? Because then nobody would come. The ikar purpose of these drashas is to teach the people the path of God, to learn the actions that you should do, to learn the laws of Hagala, of purifying kelim, ubir chametz, and burning the chametz, va'afiyas hamatzos, and baking the matzos, ushar hilchos ha-Pesach, and the other halachos, v'chim Shabbos Shuva lidrosh lefneim hilchos Yom HaKippurim, v'chag ha-Sukkos levad mashadorish me'inyan ha-tshuva. So aside from tshuva, technically you're supposed to learn the halachos of Yom Kippur, Sukkos, aside from hilchos tshuva. Va'aval im yeh ha-drasha rak b'pilpul. If the drasha is only, let's say, a in-depth, sophisticated, analytical drasha, a drush ba'alma, or it's stam drush, ein yotzim yedei chayvasan. You're not yotzer yechiyav. So the question is, what are we saimech on today that rarely is the drasha on Inyane Halacha? It's like a Hayra Shah, because many people, they only hear Divrei Torah once a year. And especially those 2 times a year, people tend to be much more receptive than other times. And it's an opportunity to talk about basically what we call the basics, or to really speak about inyanim ha'imdim ala perek. In other words, yes, it's important not to eat chametz on Pesach and to know how to kasher your kelim, but there are some more basic things that have to be spoken about, and it's become the prime opportunity to do it. But technically, according to the Mishnah Berurah, the subject matter should be halacha psuka. He says in Kamaka mitzvah. So basically, what we're saying is, you're supposed to learn halachos 30 days before. What are we saimech on that we don't? We're saimech on the Shabbos Haggadah and Shabbos Shuvah, which means Shabbos Haggadah, Shabbos Shuvah should primarily be about halacha. However, mikamaka mitzvah al kalech lecha lahaschal lomad hilchos Pesach mi Purim. Nevertheless, there isn't a mitzvah for everyone to learn Hilchos Pesach already from Purim. V'chein b'chag atzmai, and on the Yom Tov itself. V'al kapanim b'beis hamedrash b'chaburais b'vadei yishkev lomad lamed yom kaidam. In the Beis Hamedrash, when you have groups of people, something like what we're doing now, the mitzvah is to start 30 days before. Gimel. Minhag liknois chittim l'chalkan la'aniyim. The minhag is to buy wheat to distribute to the poor. L'tzarcha Pesach. Umina kadamhu. It's a very early practice. Mizman haGemara. V'chaylim b'nei ha'ir lichbais zalazah. And you could impose it on the people. Okay, so the mitzvah of Maos Chittim, we could put a lien, we could go into your account, and we could put a lien on your assets to give Maos Chittim. In our time, the minhag is not only to buy wheat, but to buy flour, to distribute flour. This way, you are advancing the hana. You're allowing the ani to enjoy a benefit. Instead of you give him money, he has to go buy the wheat and then grind the flour. It's advantageous to give him the flour directly. If you live in the city 12 months, you got to give. You can't say, "Well, I just moved here. I'm still. My old shul is still has a lien on my account." No, well, once you're in the city for 12 months, the new community could impose on you. Nowadays, once you're here 30 days, we force you to give Maos Chittim. If we see you're not here on a timeshare, you're here for good, then we impose it immediately. Then la'alter chayev. Even a Torah scholar that's exempt from taxes has to give Maos Chittim v'ayin pri megadim. Now, the Sharatzion is bothered by a kasha. Why does the Ramah say it's a minhag? The Gemara says it's a chiyuv. So, Rav Nosson Gestetner in his Sefer, he has a very interesting approach. He says the story when the Shagas Aryeh became the Rav in Metz. So back in the day when you became a Rav, you would make a takana and put it in the town ledger. So when the Shagas Aryeh became the Rav, they asked him, "What takana do you want to make?" So he wrote the Aseres HaDibros in the book of Minhagim. They said, "What? It's Aseres HaDibros." He says, "Yeah, but nobody takes them seriously. But all people take Minhagim seriously." So the Ramah, to impose the importance of Maos Chittim, he wrote it's a minhag. Because if he wrote it's a halacha, then maybe people wouldn't. That's the Rav Nosson Gestetner wrote. I assume it's he wrote it b'derech tzachos, but what?
Rabbi Glatstein said the same idea. People are makbid on.
Yeah, people are makbid on minhagim. So the question is, so why are we calling it a minhag? I think the Sharatzion says the chiyuv is to give money or even wheat. The minhag is to distribute kemach. In other words, to give money or to give wheat, that's an obligation. But to do it in a way that's makar v'hanayasa, that's a minhag. How much you have to give? Basically, it's not like matanas av yainim. Matanas av yainim is uniform. Everybody has to give. Everybody has to give the amount of money that it takes to buy a meal to aniyim. So there's a set amount. When it comes to Maos Chittim, it depends how much you could afford. I assume Lefi Mamayna means the giver. Those who slip out, they have a sin in their hands. We know that aniyim, they're dependent on this. When the ani remains in an oppressed state, a person ignores it. Yadua Mashamar Gemara Sanhedrin, called tainus. I'm not sure what he's referring to. The Gemara says that any tainus that doesn't have mipayshe Yisrael is not a tainus. But here we're saying that if chas v'shalom, the ani goes into Pesach with tainus on those who could have given to them, it's a big accusation against the person. So here's the $1 million question. Why were they misakein Maos Chittim on Pesach more than Sukkos? Do you find Sukkos? Yeah, collection, Maos Chittim. You don't find such a thing. Umasha tiknu zeh b'Pesach yosem mishar regalim, mishum she'en rashay lechol chametz. You can't eat chametz. Umatzah ina matzah kol kach lahasig, and it's not so easy to get matzah. V'im lo yachinu lai al kol yimei Pesach efshei shishar b'rav. If you don't help him out, he's going to be starving. Can you get me a mishabur chelek hey? Because there's actually, maybe I'm going to talk about Wednesday night. This is a very important question. Where does this Maos Chittim come from? We know the Rambam says by every Yom Tov. You can't. If a person just enjoys their meal and they don't feed the ani, that's not even considered Simchas Yom Tov. That's called Simchas Kreisai. And Chazal say Hashem will take the peres of the dung after the Yom Tov and smear it on the person, which is probably not pleasant. So why is this specifically ordained for Pesach? So the Sha'ar Tzion seems to be bothered by this question. There's a very interesting Gra. We'll talk about more Wednesday night. The Gra says that the pasuk says, "Shivas yamim toichal matzos, matzos yeyachel eis shivas hayamim." So it says Shivas yam toichal matzos. The word matzos is spelled chasar, mem tzadi taf. Matzos yeyachel, matzos is spelled malay. So he said like this: 7 days you have to eat matzos. That kind of matzah you could be skimpy on. But matzah yeyachel, to ensure that others have matzah, that has to be malay, that has to be beravchos. So it seems like giving Maos Chittim is a din in the mitzvah of matzah. A chelek of the mitzvah of matzah is to provide matzah for other people. Okay, so he says the reason of the Sha'ar Tzion. First of all, it's not so common. It's not so easy to get a hold of matzah, and if you don't prepare for Pesach, they could remain in hunger, or they could end up stealing. It's a time of freedom. Everyone is leaning, everyone is feeling freedom. And everyone in their household is in a great happiness. This is not honorable to God. That the poor are hungry. You're living it up, you're kicking back on your recliner with your expensive kittel, with all the ruffles, and your silver ka'ara, and your whole family sitting around. The other guy is sitting in a hut somewhere with nothing to eat. We'll do one more. You give to each ani. So again, how much should you give? It depends on your financial ability. So that's an interesting halach. We don't usually find that. When do we find? I guess now the question would be, could you use meiser money for Maos Chittim? Let's say for Matanos Aviyanim, we say you can't use meiser money. It's a separate chiyuv. But what about for Maos Chittim? I think generally say we can. Let's see Sivkatan Hey. V'noisin l'chol ani k'fi tzarkai l'chol yimei Pesach. You should give to each poor person according to his needs for the whole Pesach. V'im hu ani gadol. If he is a poor man, and he's extremely poor, he can't even bake the matzah. So basically you have to provide an ani, or to as many aniyim as you can, a matzah for the whole Pesach. And if he can't afford to bake it. Even if he has food for 14 meals, you still give him this to be able to have matzah. It's dafka to a poor person who's living in your city 12 months. So the mitzvah of Maos Chittim does not apply, I got something in the mail, there's somebody in Wyoming who needs matzah. It's specifically for your community. And the ani has to be there 12 months. Nowadays, the minhag is for 30, if he's there 30 days. If the ani plans on staying in that city, you have to give him immediately. And even an ani that doesn't live for 30 days, even though you don't have to provide him with flour for the entire Pesach at once, you have to give him matzah on Pesach. Just like this, a very interesting halach. Basically like this. A guy comes from outer space. He lands in your city. He's not going to be staying there. Right now he has no food to eat. Such an ani, even though he's not a resident of your city, you got to provide him with food for 2 meals a day. But he doesn't live here, he lives in Lakewood. Yeah, but right now he's in Cedarhurst. You got to feed him 2 meals a day. He says, give me 8 meals. I don't know, I should give you 8 meals. So 1 day at a time. You're here today, I don't have food tomorrow. Come back tomorrow. An ani that comes from a different city, it seems like there's a halachic obligation, you got to feed him that day. If it's a weekday, 2 meals. If it's a Shabbos, 3 meals. However, if the ani lives in the city, you also only have to provide him 2 meals a day. But when it comes to Pesach, you got to give him a one lump sum for enough matzah for the entire Pesach. But that's a special din if he's a resident of the city, which is determined by if he's living in the city 12 months, and if nowadays 30 days, and if he plans on staying in the city immediately. So there's a separate, the parameters of Maos Chittim are that you provide the ani for enough matzah for the entire Pesach. So that would come out a very interesting shiur. In other words, how much matzah does one person consume over the course of Pesach? 3 pounds? I don't know. So then it would come out that the shiur of Maos Chittim is a lot more than Matanas Avyanim. Matanas Avyanim, you give 2 aniyim, let's say, for a meal, right? You give Ruvain ani enough for a meal, Shimon ani enough for a meal. How much is a meal? I don't know. 2 slices and a Coke. How much is that? Nowadays it's close to $10 maybe, right? $8, let's say. So then the shiur of Matanas Avyanim would be $8, let's say $16 would be shiur Matanas Avyanim. But there's no way anybody could get for $8 or $16 enough matzah for the whole Pesach. It's probably close to, I don't know what, $80, something like that. So that means, it seems like there would be some kind of shiur, l'chol hapachos, to try to identify, to give one person enough matzah for the whole Pesach. Yeah, so those are halachos of Maos Chittim. We'll hold it over here. Shkayach.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.